All right, Herc, what do you think hurt Chivas more? The tactics of their manager, Gago, who is being heavily criticized here, or the red card with half an hour to play?
Yeah, without a doubt. And Fernando Gago, you're right, is getting killed in the press. It's without a doubt Fernando Gago. Now, listen, if there's one thing we enjoyed about Chivas this season in their play, it's how they played in that 4-3-3, how they played pressing teams, how they played being so dynamic. They were always at the front foot. They never just sat back. They never worried so much about the opponent that they showed him so much respect or so much fear until Fernando Gago did this. Fernando Gago goes line of 5 defenders, converting a defensive midfielder into a third center back who was crucial in the breakdown of this team. Committed a penalty kick and then gets red carded. But it's what happens when he gets red carded that Fernando Gago just loses me and I can't defend him anymore in this game. 61st minute, Lalo Torres gets red carded. What does he do? It's a two-legged affair. It's a 180-minute match. You got to shut this down. You cannot concede any more goals. Take your chances on the road, 1-0, 11v11. He doesn't do that. He brings on Cade Cowell. He brings on Chicharito Hernandez, who's coming off an injury. He goes forward, and he leaks 2 more goals. This is on Fernando Gago. I wish I could defend him here, but I just can't.
Yeah. What's weird is he makes mistakes on both ends, right? If you want to talk about the lineup and the back 5, you can say, you're way too conservative, right? And then if you want to talk about the game management, when you go down a goal, you can say, what are you doing? You're way too aggressive. Kind of decide on one and let that be your identity as Chivas. I think the biggest complaint, and I heard this from producer Beto, who we know is a big Chivas fan, one of the signs that he wasn't being aggressive with the lineup is Cade Cowell not being in there. At what point are we going to say Cade Cowell is like a must starter for this Chivas team to be as good as they can be in a game like this? And hey, you know me, I love América. I actually think Cade Cowell could have done some damage against this team.
That's a difficult one because in the games that Cade Cowell has started, Liga MX, let's leave Forge FC aside, the great second division Canadian team, he's not exactly proven that worth. He's a player that's very explosive in open space, and those spaces have been afforded when he comes off the bench. I'm not so much worried about Cade Cowell as I am. I just think he conceded this game. He showed, it's not even respect, he showed América fear. And América's the type of team that smells blood in the water, and they're going to eat you up. Now, we're talking about Chivas right now, but América is a very good team. América proved that they are levels above Chivas and have been for quite some time. One could argue that this is the norm when these two meet, that the red card that happened with Álvaro Fidalgo in that semifinal is not the norm. That is an exception to the rule. And normally when they meet, it's golizas like this. It's routes like this. América was far and above the better team last night.
Is it over?
Yes, absolutely.
No way for Chivas to get back into this going back to Mexico City.
Not the way América's playing against them. The only way is if something happens like it happened to Chivas and there is a red card or multiple and Jardine does something silly like Fernando Gago did against América. I don't see that happening, Seb. I think they got to forget about this one and do some type of damage control, like make it competitive, just damage control so this game doesn't get out of hand, León doesn't get out of hand, and then the return league play game between these two that's coming up doesn't get out of hand so Fernando Gago doesn't find himself out of a job.
Real quick, Herc, on América, when we recently talked about kind of the teams in Liga MX that had looked the best so far this season, we didn't mention Club América, really, either of us in that conversation. They haven't been in that conversation. They're only 1 point off the top of the table, but even I would agree with you that they have not looked their free-flowing best so far this season. After what you saw in this game against Chivas, do you believe that was more bad Chivas on the day, or is América maybe getting closer to its ceiling, closer to that league-winning form that we saw last year?
One game, actually it's 2 games. They played well against Cruz Azul and now against Chivas. And those are clásicos for them and golizas. I believe a 6-0 aggregate there in those 2 games. That's something to be said. So they are getting closer to their ceiling, but they still have Conca champions to contend with. And right now it's Chivas, but there are other teams out there. And listen, if you taught me anything, it's not to bet against Messi. So once those two cross, and I do think that narrative is already starting down south in Mexico. They're starting to separate America from the pack, which I think is silly in Mexico because there's still an undefeated team out there, which is Monterrey.
Yeah.
They're starting to separate those from the pack in their ideology. But then you start saying who could stop America, and they keep bringing up Messi. They keep bringing up Inter Miami. Yeah. So I think sooner rather than later, we're going to see what this America is about.
If there's one thing about this team, Club América, that for me as like a fan gives me confidence, because it hasn't been there necessarily on the field over the last couple months, it's the way that the team is put together. I really feel like when you look at depth and you talk about all these competitions that are coming up, América is very well positioned if they don't sell anybody, Herc, because I feel like every single week I see a new Club América attacking player linked with a transfer move. But if they keep this squad as it is, I feel good about their chances, not just in Liga MX, Conca Champions, like Leagues Cup. I think this América can compete across all fronts with the roster they have.
I think you hit the nail on the head there if they don't sell anybody. Because Cabecita Rodriguez, he wants out. He doesn't want to be behind Julian Quiñones. He doesn't want to be behind Brian Rodriguez, which is the case today. He's behind those two players, and deservedly so. But the biggest maybe sell potential transfer is Henry Martin. If Henry Martin gets sold, and per Televisa's in-house reporter, Gibran Araige, he's got an important offer from Major League Soccer that even America cannot compete with, and it's up to Henry Martin. If that transpires, I think this house of cards comes crashing down for America.
Really? Just on Henry Martin specifically, you think he's the guy that can't afford to lose?
He's the glue. I think he's the glue. The 31-year-old forward, team captain, he's the glue. He goes, America goes with it.
You think he'll be lured to MLS? Where do you think he'll end up?
Where do I think he'll end up?
Yeah.
Or where do I want to see him end up?
Say it again, Herc.
There's where I think and where I see him.
Give it to me. Give it to me.
I think it's between two teams that I would love to see him, and I think makes sense, the Seattle Sounders and the LA Galaxy. I think we may see Henry Martin in the West Coast.
Wow, look at that. Hercules Gomez suggesting Henry Martin could be on his way, not just out of Club América, but moving on to Major League Soccer.
Not my report.